The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast.
Set the scene for me, Jaguars 49ers on Sunday.
Yeah, so big shout out to Jess and Diego. They gave me a last minute like, hey, we got an extra ticket. Do you want to come to the game? Wife's sitting next to me. She gives me the thumbs up. So, once it's cleared with the boss, let's go. All right. So out there having a great time.
Your wife's like, oh, okay, cool. We get to go to the game. And you're like, oh, no, it was just a ticket.
Yeah, it was one ticket. Well, my bad. I think you heard that wrong. No, so it's good times just out there with the fans. Energy was high. People were really excited. Brock was back, right? So everybody's like, yeah, Brock's back, this and that. And then the game gets started, right? And it's like, okay, good flow. Ooh, and then the fumble, right? And you can kind of feel the air come out because you're a better football team than the Jaguars. Like, you just know it. You feel it in your bones. And so, but that's how you lose football games, right? Is you lose football games with turnovers. So then that happens, right? And then it's like, okay, we can overcome that. All right. And then the tip ball for the interception, you're like, oh, God, oh, no, here we go. At one point on that last interception by Purdy, people around me are yelling for Mac Jones.
Yeah.
I was shocked. Like, I get it. People overreact, but there was a lot of it. Like, Mac Jones, like, bring him back. And it's like, that quick, really? That to me, I wasn't on board with that because Brock Purdy's still the man. I still love Brock Purdy. He didn't play his best game. Both interceptions were tipped. Like, come on. The fumble was a strip sack. Like, these weren't necessarily Brock's fault. They're all on him, and he'll take accountability and responsibility for every single one of them. But is Mac Jones going to play a lot differently than that? Is he going to play a lot better than that? So that was hard. That was also another point that was really hard, too, was the interception, right, by Stout. That place just erupted because it felt like it was a powder keg, right? It's like, it's going to explode soon. And then that happened, and it did. And then the penalty. And it was just like the air went out of that stadium, man. That to me was like the big turning point in the game. It was a rough one to be at for sure.
The two things there. One, and they talk about this a lot, the backup quarterback is always like the most popular. So when the starter starts to kind of have some hiccups, there's a lot of people, if there's any type of faith in the backup, which more times than not, there's not that kind of faith. But, Mac Jones went out there and 49ers saw him, or 49ers fans saw him win a couple games. And now I was like, oh, Brock, he can do it. Mac Jones, he can do it. Mac Jones can do it. So now you kind of get some of those rumblings. But we know, even with Mac Jones out there, he can't really move. So I don't know how much the 49ers would have benefited with him being behind center if the offensive line wasn't playing at the level that they played in week 2 and week 3. And the other thing, I have this saying that everybody hates defensive backs. And I believe they do.
Yeah, I do. Imagine having to talk to one every day.
Everybody, I am shocked at people saying that was not a flag. Yeah. And I'm not saying, when we brought it up, I'm like, I can see it kind of going both ways.
Right.
But typically, like, if the roles were reversed and that was a Jaguar and they picked that off and they didn't call anything and people see that tug,
100%.
49er fans
he tugged him. He tugged him.
Oh yeah, he tugged him. Like, they'd be livid. So I saw it both ways. It was one of those where I could see it to where if they called it or if they didn't call it, like, okay, they didn't think it was enough of a tug, or they thought that was just enough, and they obviously did. But to go to social media and see the overwhelming support for Stout, and maybe that's just because it's 49er fans, but it makes me happy. It makes me happy to see a defensive back be defended by someone other than Eric Crocker.
Yeah, and for Stout, it's a really interesting season because he's a rookie. Teams are clearly, throwing in his direction, especially early on in the season. And, and it hasn't always been amazing for him, and he's given up some plays, but he's also made some plays. And I love seeing how quickly he's started to look like and act like a veteran player. Like, it hasn't been too big for him. He hasn't been someone who's like, oh no, he's underwater and he's folding and teams are just lighting him up. And so that's been the most impressive thing I think about Upton Stout. And a lot of the 49ers rookies stepping up early in their career.
Yeah, being at the game, everybody was livid, obviously, when the flag came out, but they never showed the replay up on the board. And when they don't show the replay on the board, oh, okay. He definitely, that was a deserved flag.
It depends on the angle, because the first angle you see was the front side, which it looks just like a perfect, amazing play. And then when you see the angle from the back, where I assume the ref was, you see the tugging, you see the hand on it. And it was really clear, and it was probably easy for the ref to throw that flag. So whatever. It wasn't, there was a lot of things that contributed to. And by the way, I just heard on Tuesday morning, John Litch on KMBR, and he didn't like the call either. He kind of you rarely hear from the GM or the coach that throw the refs under the bus, but he was not happy about that call either, as a former defensive back. But the Purdy stuff that you mentioned is like, it was like, it's all true. Purdy didn't play his best ball, but he's also hurt, and he also offensive line played poorly, and he doesn't have his full complement of weapons. So it's everything all at once. And so those fans, and we called it, Croc, earlier on in the week. We were like, well, this is setting up perfectly for an injured Brock Purdy to not look 100%. And then everyone's going to call for the backup in Mac Jones and say Mac Jones is better. Like, you can see it coming even before it happened. So I'm not surprised people were saying that. But right now with Brock Purdy, the toe, you could tell the toe was bothering him. He wasn't 100%. He wasn't normal Brock Purdy out there. And lo and behold, unsurprisingly to everyone, his toe is hurting him now after the week. And so Purdy officially is questionable going into the short week 5 against the Los Angeles Rams. And if we see Mac Jones out there behind that same offensive line that can't run the football with fewer weapons on a short week, and he's got his own little injury going on with his PCL, he wasn't moving around great at the end of the last game that he played. I don't think it's going to look all that different. And so I just think the 49ers are in a really rough spot on a short week with all the injuries they have. Looks like a sprained PCL for Ricky Pearsall. Dominic Pooney's been dealing with the sprained PCL. Mac Jones is a sprained PCL. If Brock Purdy's toe is worse than it was last week on a short week, now questionable going into this week, is Mac Jones' knee a little bit better? And, so Kyle Shanahan and Brock himself, and look, Brock's a competitor. Yeah. And I think at some point, we've seen this a lot with Christian. We've talked this about for years with Christian McCaffrey too. It's like, Christian McCaffrey wants to be on the football field. You have to save him from himself as far as, his carries. Brock Purdy's the same. If Brock Purdy looks worse than he looked last week physically, you can't let him make the call if he wants to run out there. He's like, I'm good, coach, I can play. And you say, sit your ass on the pitch. We're going to play a different guy because you're not right. And we got to get you right if we're going to go anywhere this year. And so there needs to be some big boy conversations, and we'll see who actually gets out there and plays. But I think a lot of guys are going to not practice. You barely practice anyways on a short week, so you might get like a walkthrough. So I have no idea what to expect, who's even going to be out there, what the 49ers team is going to look like on a short week against the Los Angeles Rams.
And a huge game. I mean, let's not beat around the bush here. This is a big game. This divisional matchup. This is one of your rivals, and this is one of those games where when you look at it before the season, especially coming off of this Jacksonville game, I wrote that off as like, okay, that's not a bad loss, right? If you're going to have a loss in the season, out of division, out of conference, okay, that's actually termed kind of a good loss. Thursday night would not be a good loss. It would be an understandable loss with all of the injuries and everything that the 49ers have right now. But that being said, like, as a 49er fan, this is one of the last games you want to lose.
Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k or properties or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. Canceling those all can save you money every month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL.
A big Lamar Jackson injury report was revealed, and it is causing full-blown panic.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast.
We have a Lamar Jackson injury report to dive into that came out just a couple of hours ago. I was kind of running around wondering, I usually don't do instant reaction episodes for reports, but figuring that this is about Lamar Jackson, figuring this does line up with what Ian Rappaport had to say, and honestly some of John Harbaugh's comments, figured it was worth it because of the magnitude of it. And honestly, gives us an opportunity to dive into in detail what the situations and scenarios are. So we'll talk about the report, talk about what it could mean, and talk about what this team looks like moving forward, both with and without Lamar Jackson. So again, appreciate everybody for being here today. We're 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage and content. So the regular show, this is usually not an afternoon program, but we've had a lot of these instant reaction shows with injuries. Regular shows Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern time. We also have a bunch more things that we do here on Locked On Ravens relating to the Baltimore Ravens. Today's instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. All right, let's dive into the report here. Brian Wacker of the Baltimore Sun, who obviously has been covering the team for a little bit now. He's at the facility. He does great work, great coverage. He got word. And let me pull up the report so I'm not paraphrasing. I'll read it straight from the source here. Brian saying Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson is likely to miss Sunday's game against the visiting Houston Texans with a hamstring injury. And this, he says, was from two sources with direct knowledge of the situation. They told this to the Baltimore Sun on Tuesday. Now, Brian also reports here that given the nature of the injury, he could also be out for up to 2 to 3 weeks. So it could possibly extend if he is out for the Texans game. It could possibly extend for longer than that. Now, Brian noting in his article that injuries, these hamstring injuries typically keep a player out for 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the severity. But in a little bit of a glimmer of hope moment, I guess, and what otherwise is a pretty not great report, Brian says a source said that Jackson will try to see if he could return in time for Sunday. So again, this is a report. It's not a guarantee that he misses Sunday. But again, this lines up with what Ian Rappaport reported about Baltimore's injuries when he announced Marlon Humphrey was going to probably miss a couple of weeks. He said that most of Baltimore's injuries, at least the ones that were soft tissue, like you have those injuries, Ian reporting that looked like a lot of those guys were going to miss multiple weeks. And then we got the Roquan Smith reports. And now, obviously, we get this report here from Brian about Lamar Jackson. And this kind of also, with Lamar, John Harbaugh said yesterday that he didn't feel like Lamar was not going to return to the game, even if it was close. Like there was all those things about Lamar like quitting on the Ravens, which again, I've been very consistent in saying here that I never believed that for a second. And I would have needed really hard evidence to even consider that, because that's just not who Lamar Jackson is. So we'll kind of see what this means, but obviously it's not good and it's causing a lot of panic, and rightfully so. And that's why I wanted to hop on here and talk about it, because there are a lot of different situations and scenarios that could happen here. So, and again, just to clarify the Ian Rappaport thing, he said all of Baltimore's soft tissue injuries appear to be week to week. So obviously Lamar Jackson, that falls in that category. Now, Harbaugh said that he had a pretty good feel for Baltimore's injuries and didn't obviously mention how long Lamar could be out for. He'll speak to the media tomorrow, and I doubt that he'll provide any clarity because, well, we know that John Harbaugh likes to keep these things close to the vest. Unless Lamar was going on IR, which doesn't seem to be the case here, then I think we'd maybe get something more concrete, but I don't expect anything to be concrete. But John Harbaugh did answer a question about the possibility of, or like what Cooper brings to the Ravens, Cooper Rush, if he has to go out there. And he said that, look, got a lot of playmakers around him if he's playing. Also Tyler Huntley is still there, and we know what it looks like if Tyler Huntley plays. Look, this is not good. If the Ravens lose Lamar Jackson for any amount of time, and according to Brian's report here, it feels pretty likely he's going to miss at least this Houston game. Hopefully he can come back, but obviously feels like that's a long shot at this point, according to that report. You're in a bit of an interesting spot here because you're 1-3 right now. You need to win, like absolute bare minimum. at least one of these next two games against the Texans and the Rams, right? You have, and there's the alarm if you can hear that. Yeah, you have a lot of different issues with, well, if you lose both games, you're 1-5. That essentially, in my opinion, almost ends your season unless you can rattle off, like, you'd have to win almost every single one of your games if you start 1-5 before your bye week. I'm not saying it's 100% over, because obviously you got to play the games and your schedule does open up for, probably some easier wins than, or at least win opportunities that you've had over the course of your, first 4 weeks of the season, where 3 of the games you played are against some of the top contenders in the NFL. But, this is a conversation that we had here on Locked On Ravens, really right when the Ravens signed Cooper Rush, who they gave that money to, 2 years, $12 million contract. They wanted to upgrade their backup quarterback spot. Cooper Rush is regarded as one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league. He filled in for Dak Prescott, and he won games for them in different situations when Dak had to miss time with injuries. For example, in 2022, when Dak was sidelined, Cooper Rush, his record as a starter was 4-1 for a 5-game stretch, and he actually kept their season afloat there. This is the conversation of why you give a backup quarterback money like that. And again, it's not like $1 bajillion, but it's still like, for what the Ravens were paying their backup quarterbacks, whether it was Josh Johnson or Huntley, it's a big increase. If Lamar has to miss any amount of time, be it the Texans game, be it 2 to 3 weeks, I don't know if it would extend beyond that, but we'll see. If he has to miss any amount of time, you want to have a backup in there that can win you football games and, as I said, keep your season afloat. You do not want to have a quarterback and you kind of maybe aren't as confident. You kind of go all in on Lamar, and Lamar has to miss some time, and all of a sudden this backup quarterback's losing you every single game, and then by the time Lamar gets back, well, the season's cooked anyway, right? That's the argument behind it. Now, is Cooper Rush the right guy to lead this Ravens team? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we really didn't get a super positive impression of him in the preseason. And, it also, his impression against the Chiefs was not great either, but it's what you expect, right? A lot of short passing. They're going to probably lean and rely on Derrick Henry. Like, that is the type of offense we're going to get. And now we have seen the Ravens without Lamar Jackson. The Ravens without Lamar Jackson over the course of his career are 4-9 without Lamar Jackson all time. Now, some of those games have been because Lamar has sat out games in week 18. Right? That has happened before. That Pittsburgh game in 2019 when Lamar won the MVP, they went 14-2. Lamar didn't play in that game because the Ravens were good enough where they didn't have to play their starters, and they did not. Lamar is the lifeblood of this team. Like, let's just call it what it is. Lamar Jackson is what makes this team go. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Lamar being out changes the entire offense. And here's what I want to say as well. We saw firsthand in the preseason, right? Lamar Jackson is the ultimate escape artist, right? He will turn something into nothing. He'll make something happen. Cooper Rush does not have that same ability. And you're going up against the Houston defense, by the way, which is, everybody talks about the offensive line, and rightfully so. It is terrible in Houston. The offensive line is awful. But that defense is really good. They have players, ballers, obviously guys like Derek Stingley, Will Anderson. They have Daniil Hunter over there. And actually, I think Brian noted in his article, he put a nice little summarization of what this Houston Texans defense looks like right now. The Texans right now, defensively, are number 1 in the NFL in points per game given up, 5th in total yards per game given up, and 7th in passing yards per game given up. And they also shut out the Titans, who, again, the Titans are a lot worse of a team than the Ravens are. That was Houston's first one of the season. But that defense, it could cause some problems. Now, we know that Lamar, like that Christmas Day game, absolute Ravens blowout win. But a lot of that had to do with Lamar Jackson and obviously Derrick Henry too, and a lot of the guys. But Lamar just changes everything. So if Will Anderson, Daniil Hunter, some of those guys get to Cooper Rush, he's not going to have that same ability. Nowhere close to what Lamar Jackson brings to the table of getting outside the pocket, extending plays. It's just going to be boom, sack. Like the majority of the time, most likely. We saw that in the preseason, and that's why I think the offensive line, you look at how they were playing guys like Voorhees and Rosengarten and Falele and some of the struggles that they went through in the preseason. Some of those plays, as we see every week with Lamar, he extends those plays. An offensive lineman gets beat badly, and Lamar says, all right, boom, I'm going to just go out here and roll around and make something magic happen. Now, again, he didn't have a great game against Kansas City on Sunday. The interception wasn't great, and, he made some other weird decisions. But, for the most part, Lamar Jackson, he's the best in the NFL at doing that and extending stuff. Cooper Rush, as I mentioned, does not have that same ability. And that, I think, is what concerns me the most if Lamar has to miss this Texans game, or, if he plays in this Texans game and he's not 100%, which clearly, he's not. We see the reports. We see him limping. We hear the reports of him, walking slowly to the locker room and all that. Like, he's clearly not 100%. You do not want to rush him back in this situation and scenario as well.
The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for the weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I want to bet in a given moment. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sunday. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast.
During the loss to the Eagles, the Bucs lost a lot of players to injury once again. Jamel Dean is dealing with a hip injury. Benjamin Morrison tweaked his hamstring, though early reports are that it isn't going to be a long-term issue. Greg Gaines injured his pec, which is an absolute disaster. Hassan Reddick is dealing with something. I've seen concussion. I've seen stinger. And then you have Bucky Irving leaving after the game in a walking boot, probably from when his ankle got bent up underneath the defender on that tackle when he fumbled, even though he didn't really fumble because he was down. But anyway, I digress. Evan, there was depth at corner. Now it's depleted. There was depth along the defensive line. Now it's depleted. How are the Bucs going to fill these voids? And we don't have official word on Bucky yet, but is this an opportunity now for Rachaad White to return to his 2022-2023 form?
Well, a handful of things there. Out of everything you mentioned, I'm most concerned about the cornerbacks, okay? Because what you did in the offseason was you said, all right, well, like we know Jamel Dean's going to get hurt, right? But now we have an insurance plan for Dean. That's going to be Benjamin Morrison. And you didn't even get to enjoy that insurance plan for like more than a quarter before he's dealing with a hamstring issue. Now, reports are out there saying it's a minor deal, but this is a man who missed mandatory OTAs with a hamstring. He missed training camp with a hamstring. And now he's got a hamstring issue during the season. I have a tough time believing this is just going to be like after 1 week, or he'll be ready Sunday, and this isn't going to pop up again. It's a problem. It's a big problem. And, I also don't want to make grandiose takes here about him being like injury prone or anything. First, this happens a lot with younger players, especially, you drafted a guy who came off a significant injury. And typically when you come off a significant injury, other muscles in your body are not firing on all cylinders because, you're working certain things out, or you can't work out and do these things. Zion McCollum is a player up to this point who has had relatively good health in his NFL career, but he did not his rookie season. It cost him a lot of his rookie season. So that is my aside there. At cornerback, this is what I think would likely happen. You have Zion McCollum on one side. You move Jacob Parrish to the outside, right? You have Antoine Winfield Jr. at safety. You have Tyke Smith at safety. Tyke Smith can also come down and play nickel. And depending on Christian Izzian's health, if Izzian's back, they can make this work. If Izzian's not back, now you probably got to move Tyke down to nickel, Parrish to the outside, Merriweather working in tandem with Antoine. That would be my guess. We'll see how that all plays out. As far as the defensive line is concerned, I still think they're fine there. I understand Greg Gaines could be a significant loss. I will say the team made a move. They made a move on Tuesday, moving Rashad Wisdom to the injured reserve. If Greg Gaines was a long-term season-ending type of deal, I don't understand how we wouldn't know that by now, or why they wouldn't put him on the IR already to bring in somebody to replace him. We'll see with Gaines. I'm not willing to say it's like the Kalijah Cansey issue, but I really like what I've seen from Elijah Roberts. I really like what I've seen from Elijah Simmons. And again, you can play Simmons in the run and you can play Roberts in the pass, and it's going to work out. And Roberts will continually get better as long as healthy against a run as well. Finally, running back. I think that you can probably use Rachaad White a little more than what you've used him, but it also gives you an opportunity to play Sean Tucker if you have to. And Sean Tucker is ready to be in those positions, and I think he can handle a solid workload in the Bucky Irving role. Now, Rashad, what the team has been doing, the team has actually been playing Bucky Irving on more third downs, more in pass pro, and I think with Sean Tucker, that's not going to happen. You are going to play a little bit more of Rashad in those situations. But first and second down, you probably are running Sean Tucker out there. And I believe in Sean Tucker. I think he's great. So, we don't know what Bucky's injury is. Like, could it be a high ankle sprain? Could it just be an ankle sprain? Could it be a foot thing? Like, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not going to guess off a boot because, not that it's signaled great things, but Luke Gedeke was also in a boot after game 1 and played week 2. Now he re-injured himself, which is the worry, but I'm just saying that any time that a player injures themselves, especially around your feet, ankle, whatever, typically the staff is going to throw a boot on there to just stabilize it, help the healing, and then go from there. But obviously with the team going through a walkthrough today, it's going to signal the fact that today being Wednesday, it's going to signal the fact that they're banged up, very banged up, that they can't even kind of go full here. So they've done it in the past with Wednesday walkthroughs. Typically you see it more in short weeks, but especially coming after a loss where you played, a little sloppy. Sure, it's not the ideal time of where you want to do this, but I'm expecting a very long-winded injury report.
Yeah, well, and there was a quarter of the team that was allegedly getting MRIs, and typically we hear about those. We hear about some results on Tuesday, and we haven't heard a peep about any of these guys, which I think is kind of ramping up the concern as far as, is Bucky's injury serious or was the boot a precaution? Are they going to be without Dean and Morrison this week? A lot of very frustrated and concerned Bucs fans out there, that more and more guys can fall. And this is the tough stretch. This is the stretch where you go from the Eagles, then to Seattle, and you have the 49ers, you have the Lions.
The 49ers who are also banged up, by the way.
They are. I blame Christian McCaffrey. I think Christian McCaffrey is sucking the life force out of every person on that team.
It's possible
in order to stay
logical,
healthy.
certainly logical.
Yeah, there's witchcraft happening there.
Dean, the combination of Dean, Morrison, Isian makes you alter things a little bit more than I would like.
That's fair.
But I still think that Bowles can run what he wants to run, but it really does come down to Merriweather and his success in what this defense is doing, and that kind of remains to be seen. But yeah, I mean, look, Todd is very good, even though my frustrate fans, Todd is very good at handling his personnel and knowing what their strengths are, even if he's got to do the whole bend, don't break thing and bleed yards and hold on for dear life for a field goal, right? There's just part of the calculus. But I just think it's all encompassing. I don't think it's like one player. Like Jamel Dean was playing awesome, and Benjamin Morrison came in. He looked awesome. Greg Gaines was doing some nice things in the trenches in his role, and Christian Isian is a great versatile piece. It's just, they all work together. That's the great part about football. So it's, it's a little bit different, like with Mike Evans on the offensive side of the football, where removing him from the equation dramatically changes how defenses are going to attack you, because you don't have to always have one or, the double teams on Mike, right? It doesn't open up as much for other people on the team when Mike's not out there. So, hopefully, I'm sure we'll get to it, but hopefully like Chris can knock off more of the rust this week.